There's something haunting about a city that was meant to last forever. A place built with such precision, such grand vision, that its creators believed it would endure for centuries. Yet instead of standing as a testament to human ingenuity, it vanishes, swallowed by time, leaving behind only whispers and ruins. Picture this: streets laid out in perfect harmony, walls rising with unshakable confidence, every detail crafted to create a flawless society. But then, one day, the people are gone, the buildings crumble, the name fades from memory. How does a city designed to be perfect simply disappear? Across history, civilizations have poured their dreams into stone and mortar, convinced they could outsmart time itself. They built not just for the present, but for a future they believed they could control. Some were utopian experiments, designed to eliminate poverty or conflict. Others were strategic masterpieces, positioned to dominate trade or warfare. But no matter how grand the vision, something always went wrong. A war no one saw coming. A climate shift that turned fertile land to dust. Or perhaps the most humbling truth of all: human ambition outstripping human wisdom. These cities weren't just lost to chance. Their fates reveal the delicate balance between aspiration and reality. So what can these ghostly metropolises teach us? Why do their stories still echo today? As we explore 25 of history's most astonishing vanished cities, we'll uncover more than just crumbling walls and forgotten names. We'll see reflections of our own world, the cities we build today, the futures we take for granted. Because every vanished city was once someone's certainty, someone's unshakable belief that this time things would be different. And that's what makes their silence so powerful. It's not just a mystery to solve, it's a warning, a marvel, and a mirror held up to our own ambitions. Ready to step into the shadows, let's begin. The legend of El Dorado begins with a shimmering vision, a city where gold wasn't just wealth but part of the very fabric of life. Imagine a ruler so rich, he coated his body in gold dust during sacred ceremonies, washing it away in a lake as an offering to the gods. This ritual, whispered by indigenous peoples to Spanish conquistadors, ignited a fever that would burn for centuries. But here's the twist: El Dorado was never just a place. It was a story, a metaphor, a dream distorted by desire. The Muisca people of modern-day Colombia spoke of a ceremony, not a city. Yet colonial ears heard what they wanted: proof of a paradise waiting to be plundered. Expeditions tore through jungles, scaled mountains, and drained lakes in pursuit of this golden illusion. Men like Gonzalo Pizarro and Sir Walter Raleigh gambled fortunes and lives on rumors, each convinced they'd be the one to uncover the truth. But the harder they searched, the more El Dorado seemed to retreat, like a mirage in the Andean mist. Some historians believe the legend grew from real places: the gold-rich Muisca settlements or the sacred lake Guatavita, where offerings were made. Others argue it was pure myth, a cautionary tale about the dangers of obsession. What makes El Dorado so haunting isn't its disappearance, it's the fact it might never have existed at all. The city became a mirror, reflecting the greed of those who sought it. Spanish colonizers, desperate to justify their brutal campaigns, clung to the idea of a golden kingdom to validate their conquests. Indigenous communities, perhaps aware of this hunger, spun tales that led invaders deeper into deadly terrain. In the end, El Dorado's greatest lesson isn't about lost gold, but about the stories we choose to believe and how easily they can lead us astray. And yet, the dream persists. Even today, treasure hunters scour old maps and satellite images, convinced the city is still out there, waiting. That's the power of a perfect vision. Once planted, it's almost impossible to uproot. El Dorado reminds us that some cities aren't lost to time, they're swallowed by the weight of our own expectations. The Baltic Sea holds its secrets close, but none are more tantalizing than the legend of Vinta, a city so wealthy, its very streets shimmered with silver. Sailors whispered of its towers rising like a mirage above the waves, a bustling port where merchants from across Europe and beyond traded furs, amber, and spices. For centuries, Vinta was the crown jewel of the Hanseatic League, a place where fortunes were made and lost in a single breath. But then, almost as swiftly as it rose, the city vanished. The sea swallowed it whole, leaving behind only echoes in the waves. What makes Vinta's story so gripping isn't just its sudden disappearance, it's the mystery of why it fell. Some say a monstrous storm, the kind that rolls in without warning, dragged the city beneath the water in a single night. Others claim the sea took Vinta as punishment for its arrogance. According to old Slavic tales, the city's people grew so greedy, so consumed by luxury, that the gods sent the waves to cleanse their corruption. Even the timing of its downfall is debated. Was it the 12th century, the 13th? The only certainty is that one day Vinta was there, and the next it was gone. Archaeologists have searched for traces of this sunken metropolis for generations. Some point to the shallow waters off modern-day Germany or Poland, where sonar has revealed strange shapes beneath the sand. Others argue Vinta was never a single city at all, but a collective memory of several wealthy trading ports, blurred together by time. Yet the legend endures, fueled by occasional discoveries, a silver coin, a fragment of pottery, that hint at something greater lying just out of reach. Vinta's fate forces us to ask, was this a tragedy of nature or a lesson about hubris? The sea has always been indifferent to human ambition, and even the mightiest cities are no match for its power. But there's a darker thread here too, a warning about what happens when prosperity tips into excess. Perhaps Vinta didn't just drown, perhaps it was doomed long before the waves came. Today, fishermen still talk of hearing bells ringing beneath the water on quiet mornings, a ghostly echo of Vinta's lost churches. Whether the city was real or myth, its story lingers, a reminder that even the grandest dreams can be washed away in an instant. And that's the haunting truth of vanished places. They don't just disappear. They leave us wondering what we might lose next. On the banks of the Nile, where golden sand meets the river's lifeblood, a pharaoh dared to defy 1,000 years of tradition. Akhetaten, the horizon of Aten, rose abruptly from the desert, a city of stark white limestone and open courtyards, bathed in the unrelenting glow of the sun. Pharaoh Akhenaten didn't just build a new capital, he crafted a manifesto in stone. Every aligned avenue, every sun-drenched temple screamed rebellion against Egypt's old gods. This was a place designed for purity, where the disk of Aten could shine uninterrupted by the shadows of Ammon or Osiris. The city's very layout mirrored the pharaoh's vision. No chaotic alleys, no hidden corners, just geometric perfection stretching toward the light. Yet within 2 decades, Akhetaten was a ghost town. The temples stood empty, the palaces silent. Workers chiseled Akhenaten's name from monuments, his statues smashed to fragments. Even the river seemed to turn its back as silt slowly buried the docks. How does a city vanish twice, first from history, then from the earth? The answer lies in the dangerous intersection of faith and power. Akhenaten's monotheistic revolution wasn't just unpopular. It threatened the priesthood's wealth, the military's influence, and the people's understanding of the cosmos. When his reign ended, the backlash wasn't merely political, it was existential. His successors declared him a heretic, his god a mistake. The perfect city became a crime scene, its very existence an insult to Maat, the sacred order. Archaeologists piecing together Akhenaten's fragments face a haunting puzzle. The city's ruins reveal sudden abandonment, paint pots left mid-stroke, tools dropped where workers fled. But the erasure was deliberate too. Later pharaohs hauled its stones downstream to build new cities, as if recycling the materials could purify their taint. Even Akhenaten's mummy remains missing, perhaps destroyed to prevent his soul from reaching the afterlife. Yet for all this violence against memory, the city's legacy lingers. Some scholars argue Akhenaten's sun worship influenced later monotheisms. Others see his experiment as a warning about the dangers of radical idealism. Akhenaten's fate forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Sometimes perfection is the problem. A city designed without compromise leaves no room for human frailty, no space for the messy reality of culture and tradition. The very symmetry that made Akhenaten breathtaking also made it brittle, a utopia too fragile to survive its creator. Today, the site whispers this lesson through broken pillars and half-buried streets. Not all vanished cities are lost to time. Some are sacrificed to the relentless tide of human nature. Somewhere beyond the mountains, veiled by mist and memory, lay an island that shaped an empire. Aztlan, the mythical cradle of the Aztec civilization, wasn't just a homeland, it was a promise. According to ancient codices, this was where the Mexica people began their journey, guided by the hummingbird god Huitzilopochtli, who whispered of a destiny written in the stars. The island's description was tantalizing: white herons wading through reeds, temples gleaming under a turquoise sky, a place so abundant that no one ever hungered. But when the Aztecs reached the Valley of Mexico and built Tenochtitlan, their sprawling city of canals and pyramids, Aztlan slipped from the realm of geography into legend. No one returned, no one even tried. What makes Aztlan so compelling is its duality. Was it a physical location or a spiritual compass? Some scholars scour colonial maps and indigenous accounts for clues, tracing references to Chikamaztok, the place of 7 caves where 7 tribes supposedly emerged. Others argue Aztlan was always metaphorical, a story designed to unite the Aztecs during their arduous migration. The Spanish, ever eager to justify their conquest, seized on the legend, claiming Aztlan lay north of Mexico, perhaps even within their own territories. But the Aztecs themselves seemed uninterested in pinpointing it. To them, Aztlan wasn't a place to revisit, it was a chapter to outgrow. Archaeological expeditions have searched for centuries, from the marshes of western Mexico to the deserts of the American Southwest. In the 1970s, a team thought they'd found evidence near Lake Chapala, ancient artifacts that matched Aztec descriptions. Yet the more we dig, the murkier the truth becomes. Aztlan's landscape shifts with each telling, sometimes an island, sometimes a cave, sometimes a mountain wrapped in clouds. This fluidity hints at something deeper. The Aztecs didn't just lose their homeland, they transformed it into a cultural anchor, a reminder of humility before the gods. Perhaps that's why Aztlan endures. It's not just a lost city, it's a mirror reflecting how societies forge identity. Every civilization needs an origin story, a touchstone to justify its struggles and sacrifices. For the Aztecs, Aztlan was both a beginning and a release, a place to honor but not reclaim. Today, as modern Mexicans grapple with the layers of their heritage, Aztlan resurfaces in art and activism, a symbol of roots that can't be unearthed but refuse to fade. The island may never be found, and that's precisely what makes it eternal. The mystery of Aztlan challenges our obsession with physical proof. Some truths don't live in the ground, they live in the stories we pass down, the dreams we refuse to let go. Whether real or imagined, Aztlan's power lies in its absence, a reminder that sometimes the most important places are the ones we carry inside us. deep in the emerald heart of Honduras, where vines strangle ancient stones and howler monkeys pierce the silence, lies a riddle wrapped in jungle. Ciudad Blanca, the White City. Spanish conquistadors spun tales of a metropolis gleaming with white stone temples, where gold statues of jaguars guarded unfathomable wealth. Indigenous legends spoke of a place so sacred, so powerful, that those who entered without permission would vanish without a trace. For centuries, explorers hacked through snake-infested undergrowth, lured by the promise of a lost civilization. But the city refused to be found, dissolving into myth like morning mist over the Rio Platano. Then, in 2012, a team using airborne laser mapping finally spotted something: pyramids and plazas swallowed by the canopy, a sprawling settlement frozen in time. What they uncovered was more haunting than treasure. Ciudad Blanca wasn't just abandoned, it was preserved as if its people had simply walked away, no signs of battle. No mass graves, just empty ball courts and silent altars where priests once called to the gods. Archaeologists sifting through the ruins found clues pointing to a slow unraveling. Pollen samples revealed the surrounding forest had once been stripped for crops, then abruptly reclaimed by nature. Soil layers hinted at catastrophic flooding, perhaps from hurricanes or deforestation-triggered erosion. And then there were the artifacts, not hoards of gold, but intricately carved stone vessels depicting half-human, half-jaguar beings, their faces twisted in agony. Theories about the city's fate ripple through academic circles like whispers in the jungle. Some argue a prolonged drought, amplified by the city's own environmental overreach, forced its inhabitants to scatter. Others point to ceramic shards bearing glyphs of a spreading sickness, suggesting epidemics brought by distant traders, but the most chilling possibility. Ciudad Blanca might have been a ritual center, a place where elites communed with spirits through ceremonies too extreme to sustain. Excavations revealed pits filled with the bones of sacrificed animals, their skeletons arranged in celestial patterns. Perhaps the city's downfall wasn't an accident but a choice, a collective decision to leave behind a way of life that had tipped into the unsustainable. Modern Honduras guards the ruins fiercely, aware of how easily looters could strip its legacy to fragments. Yet the deeper mystery remains, how a society capable of such architectural mastery could vanish so completely. Ciudad Blanca's stones don't just tell a story of collapse, they whisper about the delicate pact between civilization and nature. Every terrace built, every tree felled, was a negotiation with the land, one that eventually reached its breaking point. Today, the jungle is winning. Roots pry apart masonry, lichen devours carvings, but in that slow erasure lies a lesson we're only beginning to grasp. The White City didn't fail because it was weak. It fell because it was human, brilliant, ambitious, and flawed, and that's what makes its silence so profound. Not the loss of gold or gods, but the quiet reminder that no city, no matter how perfect, is immune to time. Off the storm-battered coast of Brittany, where the Atlantic gnaws at the cliffs, there's a legend that still makes fishermen lower their voices. Why's the city of 1,000 bells was said to be so beautiful. Its towers glimmered like polished silver even under the gloomiest skies. King Gradlon built it below sea level, protected by a massive dike whose only key he kept around his neck. His daughter, Dahat, loved to throw wild parties where wine flowed like the tides, and the city's decadence grew as reckless as the waves. Then came the night she gave the key to a stranger. Some say a knight, others whisper it was the devil himself, who convinced her to unlock the gates during a storm. The sea rushed in, drowning Wise in a single, furious hour. King Gradlon escaped on his magical horse, but Dahat, the stories disagree. Some claim she perished in the flood. Others say the ocean turned her into a mermaid, doomed to sing sailors to their deaths as penance. But beneath the myth lies a chilling possibility. Brittany's coastline is littered with the bones of settlements claimed by rising waters. Around the 5th or 6th century, as Roman rule crumbled and climates shifted, entire communities may have vanished beneath the waves. Archaeologists have found submerged walls near Douarnenez Bay, their stones aligned too precisely to be natural formations. Even the name Ys echoes in local geographies, meaning lowered in Old Breton or Ker is, the sunken city. Could the legend be a fragmented memory of a real disaster? A warning passed down through generations about the precariousness of life by the sea. The story's endurance reveals more than just a fascination with catastrophe. Ys embodies a tension between human ambition and nature's indifference. King Gradlon's dike was a marvel of engineering, much like the levees of New Orleans or the storm barriers of Venice's arrogant declarations that we can outsmart the ocean. Dahut's recklessness mirrors our own flirtations with excess, the way civilizations often collapse under the weight of their own indulgences. And the sea, in every version of the tale, is neither cruel nor kind. It simply is, a force that tolerates our cities until it doesn't. Modern science adds another layer. As glaciers melted after the last ice age, sea levels rose by hundreds of feet worldwide. Brittany's coastline would have been unrecognizable to its earliest inhabitants, with vast stretches of land now underwater. The legend of Ys might compress centuries of gradual erosion and catastrophic storms into a single, dramatic metaphor. It's easier to blame a princess's mistake than to confront the slow, inevitable creep of tides. Today, the myth lives on in festivals where Breton villagers reenact the flood, their papier-mâché waves swallowing cardboard towers. But the real legacy of Ys isn't in the pageantry, it's in the uneasy question the story leaves behind. How many of our own coastal cities are one generation's cautionary tale? From Venice to Miami, we're still building where the water wants to be, still trusting gates to hold back the inevitable. Ys whispers that the sea always wins. Not with malice, but with patience, and that's the most terrifying lesson of all. The stone walls of Great Zimbabwe rise from the earth like the bones of a sleeping giant, their dry, stacked curves defying gravity without a drop of mortar. At their peak, these enclosures sheltered a kingdom that commanded trade routes stretching from the Swahili coast to the interior of Africa. Gold, ivory, and copper flowed through its gates, while artisans crafted soapstone birds that became symbols of a civilization's reach. This wasn't just a city, it was the heartbeat of an empire. Yet by the 15th century, the halls stood empty, the marketplace fell silent. The question isn't just why Great Zimbabwe was abandoned, but how such mastery could dissolve so completely. Some point to the fickleness of commerce. When Arab traders shifted their routes northward, bypassing Zimbabwe's control, the economy may have crumbled like the walls left untended. Others argue the land itself rebelled. Centuries of intensive farming and cattle grazing could have stripped the soil, turning plenty into scarcity. But the most compelling clues lie in the ruins themselves. Archaeologists sifting through the debris found something unexpected. No evidence of invasion, no layers of ash from sacked buildings. Instead, they uncovered orderly abandonment. Precious objects were removed, doors were sealed. It was as if the people of Great Zimbabwe didn't flee, but chose to leave, dispersing gradually like water soaking into dry earth. Theories about their departure ripple through academic circles. One suggests a spiritual catalyst. Oral traditions speak of a sacred covenant broken when rulers grew arrogant, prompting the ancestors to withdraw their favor. Another highlights climate change. Tree ring studies reveal prolonged droughts during the city's decline, turning reservoirs to dust. But perhaps the most revolutionary idea is that Great Zimbabwe didn't so much collapse as transform. The Shona people, descendants of its builders, never vanished. They adapted, migrating to new settlements while carrying forward the cultural legacy of stonecraft and governance. The city's disappearance might simply be a failure of outsiders to recognize continuity in a different form. European colonizers, confronted with these ruins in the 19th century, refused to believe Africans could have built them. They spun fantasies of Phoenician or biblical origins, desperate to fit the narrative of a continent without history. It took decades of research to dismantle these racist myths, proving what local communities always knew: this was an African achievement, unrivaled in its sophistication. Today, the soapstone birds that once adorned the walls now grace Zimbabwe's flag, a silent rebuttal to those who tried to erase its story. Great Zimbabwe's legacy isn't just in its stones, but in the questions it forces us to ask about what constitutes an ending. Cities don't always fall in fire and chaos. Sometimes they exhale, their people scattering like seeds on the wind, carrying fragments of the past into futures we can't yet see. The walls still stand, not as tombstones, but as testament to a civilization that knew when to hold on and when to let go. The whispering reeds of Spain's Guadalquivir River hide a riddle older than Rome itself. Tartessos, a name that rolls off the tongue like a half-remembered dream, was said to be a paradise of silver and wisdom, where bearded kings inscribed laws on bronze tablets and sailors traded with a sophistication that dazzled even the Greeks. Herodotus wrote of its riches, the Bible's Tarshish may be its echo. Yet by the 6th century BCE, the city had evaporated from history, leaving behind only cryptic inscriptions and a debate that still divides scholars. Was Tartessos annihilated by nature's fury, or was it never a place at all, but a glittering illusion born from travelers' tales? Dig into the marshes of Andalusia today, and you'll find clues that tantalize. At Cancho Rono, archaeologists uncovered a sprawling sanctuary with Phoenician-style ivories and goldwork, its altars aligned to celestial events. Nearby, the Hulva hoard yielded Tartessian jewelry so finely crafted. It suggests a culture bridging Mediterranean elegance and Atlantic mystery. But here's the catch: no definitive city walls, no harbors, no cemeteries large enough to match the legends. Just fragments whispering of a society that thrived in the shadow of two worlds, the structured city-states of the East and the wild, untamed West. Theories about Tartessos' disappearance split like river deltas. One camp points to core samples from Dinyana National Park, where layers of marine sediment suggest a monstrous tsunami around 3,000 years ago, a disaster that could have drowned coastal settlements in minutes. Others argue the city fell victim to its own success, as overmining of silver exhausted the land or trade routes shifted inland. But the most provocative idea comes from linguists studying Tartessian script. Those angular symbols, once thought to record a lost language, may instead be ceremonial markings with no connection to a physical capital. Could Tartessos have been a confederation of hill forts and trading posts, its city status inflated by Greek merchants spinning yarns for eager audiences back home? What makes this vanished civilization so haunting isn't just the lack of answers, it's how its story mirrors our own hunger for lost golden ages. Medieval mapmakers plopped Tartessos onto their charts like a mirage, while Nazi archaeologists later scoured Spain for its ruins, hoping to prove Aryan supremacy. Even modern treasure hunters, armed with sonar, still chase its ghost in the marshlights. But perhaps Tartessos' true legacy is subtler. Its art shows us a people who didn't just imitate Phoenician traders, but remixed their influences into something wholly original. Its absence reminds us that some cultures leave traces too delicate for shovels, echoes in language, whispers in metalwork, a name that lingers precisely because it refuses to be pinned down. So was Tartessos real? The river mud keeps its secrets, but next time you hear wind rustle through the reeds along the Guadalquivir, listen closely. Somewhere between history and myth, between the tangible and the imagined, a lost city still hums. The desert remembers what the world forgets. Deep in the sands of Oman's empty quarter, where dunes shift like living things, there once stood a city so wealthy, its streets smelled of frankincense even in the dead of night. Yuba, called Aram of the Pillars in the Quran, Atlantis of the Sands by explorers, was no ordinary trading post. This was the crossroads of the ancient world, where caravans converged to trade resin worth its weight in gold, a commodity so precious it fueled empires and adorned temples from Rome to Babylon. The city's towers, said to be taller than date palms, gleamed under the Arabian sun, a mirage of power carved from stone and ambition. Then, without warning, the earth opened its jaws. For centuries, Yuba existed as pure myth, dismissed as a moral fable about hubris. The Quran describes its people as so wicked, so drunk on their own prosperity, that Allah buried them beneath a sandstorm that raged for 7 nights. But in the 1990s, satellite imagery revealed something startling: ancient caravan tracks converging on a spot near modern-day Shissa, where radar picked up the outline of octagonal walls and a massive depression in the earth. Excavators uncovered a fortress perched on the edge of a cavern. Its lower levels collapsed inward as if swallowed mid-breath. Pottery shards bore inscriptions linking the site to the frankincense trade, while groundwater surveys confirmed what oral histories had long suggested: Yuba didn't just vanish. It fell. The question isn't whether Yuba was real, but why it met such a dramatic end. Geologists point to the region's karst topography: limestone bedrock riddled with cavities that can collapse without warning when overstressed. Yuba's wells, vital for sustaining life in the desert, may have been its undoing. As the city grew, relentless water extraction likely weakened the underground chambers until the ground gave way. But there's another layer to the story. Pollen samples tell of a greener past, a time when the empty quarter wasn't so empty. Climate shifts around 3,000 years ago would have turned grasslands to dust, forcing Yuba's inhabitants to dig deeper, push harder, until the land itself rebelled. What makes Yuba's fate so chilling is how preventable it feels. This wasn't a volcano or an invading army. It was a slow-motion crisis born from the very strategies that made the city thrive. The same wells that sustained the frankincense trade became instruments of self-destruction. The same wealth that built towering walls accelerated the rush toward collapse. Even the legends carry an eerie prescience. The Quran's warning about Yuba's arrogance reads less like divine wrath and more like ecological prophecy. When your existence depends on drawing water from a fragile earth, prosperity and peril are two sides of the same coin. Modern parallels are hard to ignore. From Venice sinking into its lagoon to megacities pumping groundwater until the streets buckle, Yuba's lesson echoes across millennia. We still build where the earth is weakest, still chase growth until the ground literally gives way. The difference is, Yuba's people didn't have satellites to warn them. They only had stories, whispers of a city that reached too high, dug too deep, and paid the price. Today, the ruins at Shissa lie open to the sky, the cavern beneath them silent. But the wind still carries the scent of frankincense from distant trees, a fragrant ghost of the lost jewel that once ruled the sands. Across the Mississippi River from modern-day St. Louis, the earth swells into artificial mountains, remnants of a city that once rivaled London in size. Cahokia's greatest monument, Monk's Mound, still looms 10 stories tall. its 4 terraces a silent testament to the engineering prowess of a people who moved over 20 million cubic feet of dirt without beasts of burden or metal tools. At its peak around 1100, this was the beating heart of Mississippian culture, a metropolis of thatched roof homes, celestial observatories, and a grand plaza where ceremonies unfolded under the watchful eyes of priest kings. The scale was staggering: 20,000 residents, a trading network spanning continents, and a society so sophisticated it influenced cultures from the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico. Then, within 2 centuries, the streets fell quiet. By 1400, the mounds stood empty. What happened to North America's first great city? Theories about Cahokia's collapse read like a cautionary checklist for urban survival. Tree ring data reveals a catastrophic drought in the 1300s, a decades-long dry spell that would have withered crops and emptied storehouses. But climate alone doesn't explain why the city never recovered. Archaeologists sifting through midden heaps, ancient garbage piles, found clues pointing to a society unraveling from within. Deer bones grew scarce over time, replaced by smaller game like rabbits, suggesting overhunting had decimated local wildlife. Soil samples tell another story, layers of erosion coinciding with the city's expansion, as deforestation for construction and fuel stripped the land of its fertility. Then there's the chilling evidence from Mound 72, where mass graves hold the remains of young women, their bones showing signs of ritual sacrifice. Was Cahokia's downfall triggered by environmental stress, or did its leaders, desperate to maintain control, resort to extremes that shattered public trust? Yet the most haunting possibility is that Cahokia didn't so much collapse as disperse. Unlike cities ravaged by conquest or natural disaster, there's no evidence of violent destruction. Instead, the departure appears gradual, a migration back to smaller villages, a return to older ways of living. Mississippian culture didn't vanish, it transformed. Descendants of Cahokia's builders likely joined neighboring communities, carrying forward their knowledge of agriculture, astronomy, and earthwork construction. The city's end might have been less a failure than a recalibration, a collective decision that urban life, for all its grandeur, had become unsustainable. Modern parallels are impossible to ignore. Cahokia's story mirrors our own struggles with climate change, resource management, and the social tensions that arise when systems strain under their own weight. But there's another lesson here, buried in the layers of silt and time. This wasn't a primitive society undone by its ignorance. It was a highly advanced one undone by the same challenges we face today. Their mounds still stand not as tombstones but as mirrors. When we look at Cahokia, we're not seeing the past, we're seeing a version of our own future, whispering across the centuries. High in the snow-capped peaks of the Himalayas, where the air thins and the stars burn brighter, there's a legend that has lured seekers for centuries: Shambhala, the hidden kingdom where enlightenment and peace reign supreme. Tibetan Buddhist texts describe it as a circular paradise, ringed by mountains like a lotus flower, where rulers possess divine wisdom and time itself moves differently. To some, it's a literal place tucked away in some remote valley, waiting to be discovered. To others, it's a metaphor, a state of mind, a spiritual destination rather than a physical one. But what makes Shambhala so captivating isn't just its mystery. It's the way this legend has shaped history, politics, and even wars, all while remaining tantalizingly out of reach. The earliest references to Shambhala appear in ancient Kalachakra texts, where it's portrayed as a sanctuary of advanced knowledge, untouched by the corruption of the outside world. The descriptions are vivid palaces of crystal and gold, gardens where flowers never wilt, and a library containing the secrets of the universe. But here's the twist: Shambhala isn't just a refuge. It's also prophesied to play a role in humanity's future. According to tradition, when the world descends into darkness and greed, a great king will emerge from Shambhala to lead a final battle against ignorance, restoring balance to the earth. This duality, both a haven and a call to arms, has made the legend irresistible to everyone from medieval monks to 20th century explorers. The hunt for Shambhala's physical location has taken some bizarre turns. Russian mystic Nicholas Roerich led expeditions through Central Asia in the 1920s, convinced the city lay in the Altai Mountains. The Nazis, obsessed with occult lore, sent teams to Tibet in the 30s, searching for what they believed was the ancestral homeland of the Aryan race. Even modern scholars have proposed real-world candidates, from the hidden valleys of Bhutan to the deserts of Xinjiang. Yet every supposed sighting crumbles under scrutiny, leaving only whispers and speculation. The more we search, the more Shambhala seems to retreat, like a reflection in a mountain lake that vanishes when you reach for it. Perhaps that's the point. Tibetan lamas teach that Shambhala exists on a different plane, accessible only to those pure of heart. In this view, the kingdom isn't lost, it's hidden by design, revealing itself only when the seeker is ready. This spiritual interpretation transforms Shambhala from a geographical puzzle into a mirror of human aspiration. It asks us, are we chasing a place, or are we chasing the better versions of ourselves? The legend's endurance suggests that some truths can't be pinned to a map. They live in the space between myth and meaning, where the journey matters more than the destination. Shambhala's legacy isn't just in the expeditions it inspired, but in the questions it forces us to confront. Why do we need the idea of a perfect city? Is it hope, escapism, or a challenge to build something better in our own world? The answers might lie not in the Himalayas, but in the way the story still resonates, a reminder that sometimes the most powerful places are the ones we can't find because they're not meant to be found. They're meant to be imagined, strived for, and carried within us, and that's why Shambhala, whether real or not, will never truly disappear. There's a quiet brilliance to Mohenjo-Daro that still takes archaeologists' breath away. Walk its grid-patterned streets today, and you're treading the same meticulously laid bricks that residents did over 4,000 years ago. A city so advanced it had sewage systems and public baths when much of the world was still living in huts. The Indus Valley civilization didn't just build, they engineered for permanence. Every gutter sloped at precise angles to ensure drainage. Every home connected to an underground network of pipes that would put some modern cities to shame. This wasn't just urban planning, it was a manifesto in clay and stone, a declaration that civilization could thrive in harmony with nature. Yet by 1900 BC, the music stopped. The wells filled with dust, the workshops fell silent. How does a society that mastered water, the very essence of life, vanish without a single battle cry left in the ruins? Theories about Mohenjo-Daro's collapse ripple like heat waves over the Pakistani plains. Early excavators pointed to broken skeletons in the streets, whispering of Aryan invaders sweeping down from the north. But newer research tells a subtler story. Those skeletons, they're scattered across layers of sediment, suggesting no single massacre. Instead, the earth itself offers clues. Core samples from the nearby Hakra River show catastrophic flooding around the time of abandonment, walls of water that would have drowned crops, salted fields, and turned orderly blocks into swamps. Yet even this doesn't fully explain why the city never recovered. Dig deeper and you'll find another villain: drought. Isotope analysis of ancient groundwater reveals a terrifying whiplash. After centuries of reliable monsoons, the rains suddenly failed. The rivers shrank, The same ingenious drainage systems that once carried away excess water now stood useless like empty veins in a dying body. But here's where Mohenjo-Daro's story twists. Unlike other lost cities, there's no evidence of panic, no hoards of treasure hastily buried, no barricades erected in desperation. The artifacts left behind, toys, jewelry, even a famous dancing girl statue, speak of orderly departure. This wasn't a population fleeing catastrophe. It was a civilization making calculated choices. Archaeologists speculate that the people didn't perish so much as disperse, migrating eastward toward the Ganges basin where water still flowed. The genius of their urban design may have bought them time to adapt, their collective knowledge carried forward even as their bricks crumbled behind them. What lingers most hauntingly is the question of what might have been. The Indus script remains undeciphered, its symbols taunting us from seals and pottery. Were they recording poetry, laws, lessons from their own collapse? We'll likely never know. But Mohenjo-Daro's legacy isn't just in its unanswered mysteries, it's in the mirror it holds up to our own cities. When we lay pipes beneath skyscrapers or design flood-resistant neighborhoods, we're walking the same tightrope they did, balancing innovation against nature's unpredictability. Their masterpiece didn't fail because they were ignorant. It fell because they were human, striving for perfection in an imperfect world. The stones whisper a warning we do well to hear. No civilization, no matter how brilliantly designed, is immune to the sky's indifference. Beneath the cerulean waters off southern Greece, time has preserved a ghostly snapshot of Bronze Age life. Pavlopetry, the world's oldest submerged city, sprawls across the seafloor with an eerie precision, its streets still winding between foundations, its courtyards open to the sky where fish dart through doorways that once echoed with human voices. Dating back nearly 5,000 years, this wasn't some rudimentary settlement. Archaeologists mapping the site found two-story buildings, sophisticated drainage systems, and even a central plaza designed for gatherings. The city's layout reveals a society that understood urban living on a level unmatched by contemporaries. But around 1100 BC, the waves crept in. The question isn't just why Pavlopetry sank, it's why its people never returned to reclaim what the sea stole. Theories about its abandonment read like a primer on environmental vulnerability. Core samples from the surrounding seabed tell a story of gradual encroachment as rising sea levels, a phenomenon we now call marine transgression, has slowly swallowed the coastline. But there's another suspect lurking in the geologic record. Greece sits atop the collision zone between the Eurasian and African tectonic plates, a region riddled with fault lines. Evidence of sudden subsidence ground collapsing in catastrophic drops suggests an earthquake might have accelerated Pavlopetry's demise. Imagine the horror. One night, the earth shudders, and by dawn, the marketplace is knee-deep in seawater. Yet what's chilling isn't the disaster itself, but the response. Unlike cities ravaged by war or famine, Pavlopetry shows no signs of rebuilding. Its people simply adapted, moving inland as if acknowledging the sea's irrevocable claim. Diving deeper into the ruins reveals even more tantalizing clues. Ceramic fragments bear markings linking Pavlopetry to the Minoans, the seafaring superpower of ancient Crete. Was this a bustling trade hub, a node in a network that stretched across the Mediterranean? The discovery of imported goods, obsidian from distant islands, pottery styles from Egypt hints at a city deeply connected to the wider world. But that very connectivity might have sealed its fate. When the Minoan civilization collapsed around 1500 BCE, possibly due to the volcanic eruption at Thera, Pavlopetry's economy could have unraveled like a frayed rope. A city dependent on trade would wither when the ships stopped coming, leaving it doubly vulnerable to nature's whims. Modern parallels are impossible to ignore. Pavlopetry's slow motion drowning mirrors the plight of coastal cities today, from Venice to Jakarta, as melting glaciers and sinking land reshape shorelines. But there's a crucial difference. Our ancestors knew when to retreat. They lacked the technology to fight the sea, so they adapted instead. In that choice lies a humbling lesson about resilience. Pavlopetry's ruins aren't just a relic, they're a conversation between past and present, written in stone and saltwater. The next time you hear about a waterfront development project or a seawall holding back the tide, remember this: 5 millennia ago, an entire city learned the hard way that the ocean always has the final word. And its silent streets still whisper that truth to anyone willing to listen. In the sun-scorched hills of Algeria, where the Sahara's golden fingers brush against the Atlas Mountains, lies a masterpiece of Roman urban planning frozen in time. Timgad, known as Thamugadi to its founders, was Emperor Trajan's vision of imperial perfection, a city carved from the desert with mathematical precision in the year 100 CE. Its streets formed a flawless grid, each intersection marked by towering stone arches, while its public baths rivaled those of Rome itself. This wasn't just another military outpost, it was a statement. A declaration that even at the empire's farthest edge, Roman order could thrive. For centuries, Timgad flourished, its theaters echoing with Latin verse, its markets bustling with olive oil and African ivory. Then, like so many Roman marvels, it slipped into silence, swallowed by sand and time. But Timgad's fate wasn't just about abandonment, it was about the fragility of systems too rigid to adapt. Walking through the ruins today, you can still trace the ghost of Roman logic in every stone. The city's original blueprint was so exact, so unyielding, that later expansions had to contort around its rigid grid like vines straining against a trellis. That precision was its strength and its Achilles heel. When Rome's grip on North Africa weakened in the 5th century, Timgad's dependence on imperial infrastructure became a death sentence. Aqueducts that once channeled mountain springs fell into disrepair, grain shipments from Sicily dwindled, the desert, patient and relentless, crept back in. Yet what's fascinating isn't just the city's decline, but how it reveals the paradox of Roman engineering. Their genius for standardization created cities that could be replicated from Britain to Syria, but that same uniformity made them vulnerable when the central system faltered. Archaeologists peeling back Timgad's layers have uncovered a poignant evolution. Early inscriptions boast of loyalty to distant emperors, later ones plead for local governors to save them from bandits. The Grand Theatre, once host to comedies and gladiatorial combats, was repurposed as a fortress, its marble seats torn out to build crude defensive walls. Even the baths, those symbols of Roman leisure, became makeshift housing for squatters huddling around fires in the dry plunge pools. This wasn't a sudden collapse, but a slow unraveling, a city trying and failing to reinvent itself as the world changed around it. The sand that buried Timgad also preserved it. Unlike Roman cities recycled for medieval building materials, its isolation kept its bones intact. When excavators first brushed away the dunes in the 1880s, they found shop counters still bearing price inscriptions, mosaic floors depicting dolphins and grapes untouched by looters, even love poems scratched into walls by long-dead residents. These intimate details remind us that Timgad wasn't just a textbook example of urban planning, it was home. A place where soldiers retired to vineyards, where children played in fountains, where people believed their way of life would last forever. What lingers most hauntingly is the question of alternatives. Could Timgad have survived if it had been less perfect? If its streets had curved organically like older North African cities? If its people had relied less on distant Rome and more on local knowledge? We'll never know, but the lesson whispers through the ruins. Civilizations don't fail because they're weak. They fail when they can't bend. Timgad stands today not as a testament to Roman glory, but to the delicate balance between order and adaptability, a balance every society must strike now as then. The desert didn't kill this city. It simply waited for the moment when human certainty turned to dust. The wind howls across the high plains of eastern Turkey, whistling through arches that haven't felt the weight of a roof in centuries. This is Ani, the city that once made silk traders gasp and kings tremble, a metropolis so rich in faith and artistry. They called it the city of 1,001 churches. At its peak in the 10th century, Ani wasn't just the capital of the Armenian Bagratid dynasty. It was a crossroads of civilizations where Byzantine, Persian, and Seljuk influences collided to create something extraordinary. Its skyline bristled with domes and spires, its walls stretched 2.5 miles, and its markets buzzed with languages from across Eurasia. Yet today, those same walls stand broken, their stones scattered like fallen chess pieces across the grassy plateau. The question isn't just why Ani fell, it's whether any amount of human ingenuity could have saved it from the forces that tore it apart. Ani's first vulnerability was written in the land itself. Perched on a triangular plateau carved by the Akhurian River gorge, the city's dramatic cliffs provided natural defenses, but also perched it atop one of the most seismically active zones on Earth. The same tectonic forces that created its strategic height also doomed it to a relentless cycle of destruction. Archaeologists counting the cracks in Ani's remaining structures have identified at least 8 major earthquakes between the 11th and 14th centuries, each one peeling away another layer of its grandeur. The Cathedral of Ani, once the largest domed church in Christendom, lost its cupola in 1319, leaving its shattered ribs exposed to the sky. But earthquakes alone don't explain the city's abandonment. They were merely the hammer, the chisel was human hands. Wave after wave of invaders saw Ani's wealth as a prize waiting to be claimed. Byzantine forces sacked it in 1046. The Seljuk Turks swept through in 1064, leaving behind the exquisite Manuchihr Mosque as both trophy and testament to cultural fusion. Then came the Mongols, the Georgians, the Kurds, each conquest stripping away another piece of Ani's identity. By the time a devastating earthquake in 1319 delivered the final blow, the city was already a shadow of itself. Could stronger walls have changed its fate? Perhaps. But Ani's real weakness wasn't its fortifications, it was its very desirability. No medieval army could resist a prize this glittering, and no stone could withstand both human greed and the earth's indifference. What makes Ani's ruins so haunting isn't just their scale, but their artistry. Even in decay, the Church of St. Gregory startles visitors with its intricate stone lacework, frescoes of saints peering through cracked plaster like ghosts. The Tigran Honans Church hides a secret, its interior walls covered in vivid frescoes depicting scenes from the life of Christ, their colors miraculously preserved by centuries of neglect. These weren't just buildings, they were declarations of faith and identity crafted to outlast generations. That they still stand, even as fragments, speaks to the skill of their makers and the fragility of all human endeavors. Modern conservation efforts face a cruel irony. The same seismic activity that destroyed Ani now threatens to erase it completely. Each minor tremor shakes loose another carving, another delicate fresco. Political tensions between Armenia and Turkey, which controls the site, have complicated preservation work, leaving the ruins caught between history and geopolitics. Yet there's a poetic truth in Ani's slow dissolution. Cities aren't meant to be frozen in time, they're living things that rise, adapt, and sometimes fade. The stones whisper a lesson we're still learning. No amount of beauty or power can defy the twin forces of nature and time. Ani didn't fail. It simply completed its arc, leaving behind not just rubble but a question etched into every broken arch. What will remain of our own cities when the wind has its way? The wind still cuts through the empty stone halls of Hvalsnes, where Viking longships once bobbed in the fjord below. This wasn't some struggling outpost, it was the crown jewel of Norse Greenland, a farming settlement so prosperous it exported walrus ivory to Europe and even hosted a royal wedding in 1408. The ruins tell a story of competence. Thick-walled churches built to last centuries, barns sturdy enough to withstand Arctic winters, and pastures that fed hundreds. Yet by the mid-1500s, Hvalsnes halls stood silent. The last written record, a fragment from a 1424 wedding description, noting the bride's Icelandic ancestry. After that, nothing, not a battle cry, not a farewell, just empty hearths and the creeping permafrost. What makes Hvalsnes' disappearance so unsettling is how preventable it seems at first glance. These weren't amateurs, they were descendants of Eric the Red, survivors who'd thrived in Greenland for over 400 years. Their downfall wasn't sudden, it was a slow unraveling, a series of choices that turned survivable challenges into existential threats. Take climate change. Tree rings and ice cores reveal the Little Ice Age was tightening its grip, shortening growing seasons by weeks. But Norse farmers stubbornly clung to European customs, refusing to adopt Inuit hunting techniques even as their cattle starved. Archaeologists find bones of undernourished livestock in the middens, their teeth worn down from gnawing bark in desperation. Meanwhile, Inuit settlements nearby flourished, their seal hunting economy adapting seamlessly to the cooling world. Then there's the isolation. Greenland's Norse relied on ships from Norway for iron, timber, and prestige goods, a lifeline that grew increasingly erratic as Europe's economy shifted. A single excavated letter from the 1400s pleads for a missed supply ship. Come quickly or we shall perish. But the real killer might have been pride. Excavations at Hvalsnes Cemetery reveal bodies buried in European woolens, not warmer sealskins. Their teeth show no signs of marine diet, proving they'd rather starve than eat like savages. In the end, it wasn't just the cold that doomed them, it was the inability to imagine a different way of life. Yet the full story hides in subtle clues. Some houses show signs of hurried abandonment, half-carved chess pieces left on benches, tools dropped mid-repair. Others were meticulously sealed, as if their owners planned to return. A few Inuit oral histories speak of strange, red-haired people seen traveling south by kayak in the 1500s. Did the last Norse of Hvalsnes assimilate with their former rivals, or did they sail into the mists, hoping to find a new home? The ruins won't say. Today, Hvalsnes church stands roofless but unbowed, its mortarless stone walls still defying the Arctic wind. It's a monument not to failure, but to the peril of inflexibility, a warning etched in frost and silence. When the world changes, survival doesn't favor the strongest. It favors those willing to adapt. The jungle has a way of reclaiming what humans dare to build, but few vanishings are as breathtaking as that of Angkor. Imagine a city so vast, its outer walls stretched farther than modern-day Paris, a metropolis of glittering temples, artificial lakes, and canals that turn the Cambodian wilderness into a chessboard of water and stone. At its height, the Khmer Empire's capital was a masterpiece of hydraulic engineering, with reservoirs so precise they could predict monsoon floods and distribute water year-round to 1 million people. The crown jewel, Angkor Wat, still stands as the world's largest religious monument, its towers piercing the canopy like stone arrows shot toward the heavens. Yet by the 1400s, this aquatic wonderland lay silent, its canals clogged, its temples strangled by fig trees. How does an empire that tamed water suddenly find itself parched? Theories about Angkor's collapse ripple through history like the echoes of its own reservoir gates. For centuries, scholars pointed to the sacking by Thai invaders in 1431 as the death blow, a dramatic fall fit for epic poems. But archaeology paints a subtler, more unsettling picture. Core samples drilled from Angkor's ancient barrays, those massive reservoirs, reveal layers of sediment telling a story of systemic failure. The Khmer's water network, once a marvel of precision, grew brittle under its own complexity. Canals meant to prevent flooding instead funneled erosion from over-farmed land, silting up the lifeblood of the city. Tree ring studies from Vietnam's highlands confirm something even more ominous. Decades of drought in the 1300s, punctuated by catastrophic monsoons. The system designed to buffer against nature's whims became its victim as erratic weather overwhelmed centuries of careful planning. Yet water alone didn't doom Angkor. The city's fate was also written in the shifting ambitions of its rulers. Inscriptions boast of later kings diverting resources to newer, flashier temples farther from the capital, neglecting the maintenance of Angkor's intricate waterways. The same elites who once fed the populace with rice grown in engineered paddies now prioritized symbolism over survival, building mountaintop shrines while the lowland canals cracked. Meanwhile, international trade routes shifted toward coastal ports, leaving inland Angkor economically stranded. The Khmer Empire didn't so much collapse as unravel, a slow fraying of political will, environmental balance, and social contract. What lingers most hauntingly in Angkor's ruins is the scale of its ambition. Walking through the overgrown causeways today, you can still see the ghost of that ambition in the 1,000-year-old laterite blocks, each one fitted without mortar yet still standing after centuries of neglect. The Bayon Temple's enigmatic faces staring in all directions seem to ask a silent question. Was this a city that failed, or one that succeeded too well? Its very grandeur may have sealed its fate, a victim of the same ingenuity that built it. Modern Cambodia keeps Angkor's legacy alive, not just as a tourist attraction but as a cautionary tale. Hydrologists now study its ancient reservoirs for clues about sustainable water management, while climate scientists see eerie parallels between its demise and today's megacities grappling with rising seas and sinking aquifers. The jungle may have swallowed Angkor, but its stones still whisper a warning. Civilization is never a one-time triumph. It's a daily negotiation with the land, the sky, and our own unyielding pride. The most perfect city isn't the one that stands forever, but the one that learns when to bend. Before pyramids pierced the sky or pharaohs carved their names into eternity, there was Thinis, a city so ancient even the Egyptians spoke of it in whispers. According to Manetho, the 3rd century BC historian, Thinis was the first capital of a unified Egypt, the beating heart of the early dynastic period where kings like Narmer forged a single kingdom from the Nile's fractured shores. Yet today, not a single stone of Thinis remains conclusively identified. Its absence is so total that scholars still argue whether it lay near modern-day Gurga or beneath the sprawling fields of El Berba. How does a city that birthed an empire vanish without leaving so much as a footprint? The mystery of Thinis begins with its geography. Nestled somewhere along the Nile's western bank, the city likely thrived at the crossroads of trade routes linking Upper Egypt to the Delta. But the river that gave it life may have also sealed its fate. The Nile's annual floods, while nourishing, were unpredictable. Shifting channels could drown entire districts in silt or starve them of water. Core samples from the region reveal layers of sediment consistent with catastrophic flooding around 2800 BC, precisely when Thinis' influence waned. Yet water alone doesn't explain the erasure. Political intrigue played its part. As power consolidated farther north in Memphis, Thinis faded from royal records, its legacy overshadowed by grander capitals. Without patronage, its temples crumbled. Without kings to immortalize its name, its stories dissolved into the desert wind. But here's the twist: Thinis never truly disappeared. Its spirit lingered in the titles of later pharaohs, who still called themselves Thinite kings, centuries after the city's fall. Archaeologists excavating nearby Abydos, a necropolis linked to Thinis, found tombs packed with artifacts bearing its name, proof that its memory outlived its walls. Even the god Osiris, lord of the underworld, was said to have ruled from Thinis before his murder, weaving the city into Egypt's sacred mythology. This duality, both lost and immortal, makes Thinis unique among vanished cities. It wasn't just a place, it was a symbol, a foundational myth that endured even as its bricks turned to dust. Modern searches for Thinis read like detective novels. In the 1930s, a French team scoured Gurga based on classical texts, finding nothing definitive. Recent remote sensing surveys hint at buried structures near El Berber, but the evidence remains tantalizingly vague. Some scholars propose a radical theory. Thinis wasn't a single city at all, but a confederation of settlements sharing a name, their collective importance magnified by time. If true, its loss might reflect our own desire to pin legends to maps, to dig up what was never meant to be found. What makes Thinis' ghostly presence so haunting isn't the lack of ruins, it's what its absence says about how civilizations remember themselves. The earliest chapters of history are written on parchment, not stone, vulnerable to the whims of time and politics. Thinis reminds us that some cities live not in their foundations, but in the stories we tell about beginnings. And perhaps that's why, after 5,000 years, we're still searching, not for walls or tombs, but for the first heartbeat of a civilization that would outlast them all. One night in 373 BC, the earth beneath Helike convulsed with a violence that still echoes through Greek legends. The prosperous city, home to temples, a bustling marketplace, and a famed sanctuary dedicated to Poseidon, vanished in hours, swallowed by the sea as if the god himself had reclaimed it. Ancient writers described the horror: buildings collapsing into chasms, a tsunami surging inland to drown survivors clinging to rooftops, and the city's ruins submerged beneath a lagoon so suddenly that fishermen later snagged their nets on marble columns. For centuries, Helike became a cautionary tale, a mythologized disaster whispered about but never found. Then, in the 1990s, archaeologists peeling back layers of silt near the Gulf of Corinth uncovered a shattered Bronze Age world preserved like Pompeii, but with a twist. This wasn't just a city destroyed by nature, it was a city erased twice over, first by water, then by memory. Helike's fate wasn't merely bad luck. The city sat atop a tectonic tinderbox where the African plate grinds against Eurasia, creating fault lines that still trigger quakes today. Core samples reveal the catastrophe was even more complex than ancient accounts suggested. The initial earthquake liquefied the soft coastal soil, causing entire neighborhoods to slide into the Gulf. Then, as survivors staggered through the rubble, a second disaster struck. A tsunami generated by underwater landslides finished what the quake began, dragging Helike's remnants into the deep. But here's the haunting detail: the city didn't sink gradually. It dropped almost instantly, preserved in a watery time capsule that kept pottery, coins, and even wooden beams intact for millennia. Yet the real mystery isn't how Helike fell, but why its memory faded so completely. Unlike Pompeii, which became a macabre tourist attraction for Romans, Helike was actively forgotten. Ancient sources hint at a dark reason: the city's alleged arrogance. According to Strabo, Helike's leaders had exiled a group of Ionians seeking refuge at Poseidon's sanctuary, defying sacred customs. When the disaster struck, Greeks saw it as divine punishment, a narrative so potent that later generations avoided the ruins, fearing the gods' lingering wrath. Even Alexander the Great's historians, meticulous in documenting his campaigns, skipped Helike as if it were cursed. The lagoon that drowned it became a no-go zone, its name scrubbed from new maps. Rediscovering Helike in the 1990s required equal parts science and stubbornness. Archaeologists combing through farmers' fields near the village of Rizamilos noticed something odd: ancient pottery fragments mixed with seashells far inland. Ground-penetrating radar revealed the ghostly outlines of walls beneath layers of sediment, while diver excavations offshore uncovered a submerged road still lined with votive statues to Poseidon. The most chilling find: human skeletons trapped in collapsed buildings, their postures frozen in mid-flight. These weren't just ruins, they were snapshots of a single night's terror. Helike's legacy lingers in modern seismology labs, where its destruction serves as a textbook example of compound disasters, quakes triggering tsunamis and liquefaction in a deadly chain. But there's a deeper lesson in its stones. Cities don't vanish just because they're destroyed. They vanish when stories about them stop being told. Helike's erasure from history wasn't an accident. It was a choice, a collective turning away from a place deemed too dangerous to remember. Today, as we wrestle with how to memorialize tragedies, from sunken shipwrecks to earthquake-leveled towns, Helike whispers a question: what does it mean to forget, and who decides which ruins are worth keeping alive? The answer might lie not in the ground, but in the stories we refuse to let go. Beneath the waves off Israel's northern coast, where sunlight filters through the Mediterranean's blue embrace, lies a time capsule from humanity's earliest experiments with community. Atlet Yam isn't just another sunken settlement, it's a perfectly preserved window into the Neolithic world. A village so intact that archaeologists found stone hearths still lined with fish bones and stone mortars bearing the last grains ground by hands 9,000 years ago. This was no primitive camp. It was a thriving hub where people built circular homes, dug freshwater wells, and even constructed what may be the world's oldest known ritual stone circle. Yet around 6300 BC, the sea crept in. The question isn't just why Atlet Yam drowned, it's whether its people saw the disaster coming or simply woke one morning to find their world disappearing beneath them. Diving into Atlet Yam's ruins feels like stepping into a ghost story written by the earth itself. The village layout reveals meticulous planning, homes spaced evenly around a central square, graves carefully positioned beyond the living quarters. But the most haunting discoveries lie in those graves. Skeletons show signs of chronic ear infections, likely from constant diving for shellfish, while DNA analysis reveals tuberculosis strains far older than previously recorded. These weren't just victims of rising seas, they were people with complex lives, struggles, and triumphs. Then there's the eerie evidence of their final days. One well-preserved skeleton, dubbed the Atlet Yam woman, was found curled in fetal position, her hands clutching her stomach as if in pain, possibly from the very tuberculosis her bones betrayed. Was she among the last to leave, or did she have no chance to flee? Theories about Atlet Yam's demise split along two compelling lines. Sediment cores tell a story of gradual encroachment, rising sea levels from melting glaciers that swallowed coastal settlements worldwide. But there's a darker possibility etched into the seabed. Geologists mapping the area found disturbed layers of sand and shell far inland, patterns consistent with tsunami deposits. Could a Mediterranean mega-wave triggered by an undersea landslide or volcanic collapse have delivered the killing blow? The evidence is tantalizing. A stone tool workshop abandoned mid-task, fish nets left tangled on posts, even a stone altar still bearing offerings. These aren't the signs of orderly retreat, they're snapshots of interrupted lives. Yet Atlet Yam's greatest legacy might be what it says about resilience. Unlike later coastal cities that fought the sea with walls and pumps, these early farmers adapted, then moved on. Archaeologists tracing genetic and cultural links find their descendants in inland Jericho and Çatalhöyük, carrying forward agricultural knowledge honed by the shore. There's a profound lesson in that continuity. Civilizations don't end when landscapes change. They transform, carrying memories of lost worlds into new ones. Today, as rising tides threaten modern cities, Atlet Yam's silent stones speak louder than ever. We've built skyscrapers where they built stone circles, yet our relationship with the sea remains just as precarious. The difference, they lacked our technology, but perhaps understood better than we do that some forces can't be conquered, only respected. When divers brush sand from Atlet Yam's ancient wells, they're not just uncovering a tragedy. They're meeting a mirror, one that reflects our own uncertain future in the ripples of the distant past. The Avenue of the Dead stretches like a scar across the valley, flanked by pyramids so massive they seem to press against the sky itself. Teotihuacan wasn't just a city, it was a celestial blueprint carved into earth and stone, a place where every building aligned with the stars and every mural whispered of gods walking among mortals. At its zenith around 450 CE, this was the New World's unrivaled superpower, home to over 100,000 people and a cultural magnet whose influence stretched from Maya jungles to the deserts of northern Mexico. Its artisans crafted obsidian blades sharper than surgical steel. Its priests charted Venus cycles with jaw-dropping precision, and its architects engineered apartment complexes so advanced they wouldn't be matched in the Americas for another 1,000 years. Then, around 550 CE, the fires came. Not the slow fade of decline, but a conflagration so violent it left blackened walls and shattered idols in its wake. The mystery isn't just why Teotihuacan fell, it's why its conquerors, whoever they were, took such care to erase its soul. Walk the ruins today, and the signs of deliberate destruction are unmistakable. The Temple of the Feathered Serpent, once sheathed in glittering obsidian, lies gutted, its sculpted heads hacked away, its stairways scorched. Residential compounds bear the marks of targeted arson, as if the flames were guided by some vengeful precision. For decades, archaeologists assumed this was the work of outside invaders, perhaps the militaristic Toltecs or restless subject states. But recent discoveries have upended that theory. Mass graves near the city center hold the remains of elites, their bones showing signs of brutal execution. This wasn't just an attack, it was a revolution. The very people who built Teotihuacan's glory may have torn it down, their fury ignited by generations of inequality hidden beneath the city's pristine facade. Beneath the geometric perfection, Teotihuacan harbored cracks as deep as its foundations. The city's rigid grid and identical apartment blocks suggest a level of social control unheard of in ancient Mesoamerica. Murals in the elite compounds depict processions of identical figures, their individuality erased, a stark contrast to the flamboyant personal portraits favored by the Maya. Some scholars argue this uniformity masked a powder keg of unrest. Isotope analysis of skeletons reveals stark divisions. The privileged dined on exotic foods like crocodile and jaguar, while laborers subsisted on maize gruel. The pyramid builders, it seems, grew weary of their burdens. Yet rebellion alone doesn't explain the city's total abandonment. ecological clues buried in lake sediments tell another chapter of the story. Pollen samples show deforestation spiking in the centuries before collapse, as Teotihuacan's insatiable demand for construction timber and plaster stripped the surrounding hills bare. Without tree roots to anchor it, soil washed into vital irrigation canals, choking the farmland that fed the masses. Then came the drought's decades of withering heat recorded in stalagmites from nearby caves. The same engineered canals that once turned the valley into a breadbasket may have accelerated its downfall as salinization from over-irrigation poisoned the fields. A society that mastered water became its victim. The most haunting evidence, though, lies in what didn't survive. Unlike Rome or Cairo, where ancient stones were recycled into new monuments, Teotihuacan's ruins were left untouched for centuries. The Aztecs, who rediscovered the city in the 1300s, believed it was the birthplace of the gods, but even they dared not rebuild it. This wasn't just a fallen capital, it was a taboo, a warning etched into the landscape. Perhaps that's Teotihuacan's true legacy. Its perfection wasn't merely unsustainable, it was terrifying. A civilization that sought to mirror heaven on earth discovered too late that mortals make poor gods. The charred stones still whisper their lesson. No city, no matter how magnificent, can outlast the people who breathe life into its walls. The wind still howls across the ruins of Loulan, scouring the sun-bleached timbers that once framed bustling market stalls and Buddhist temples. This wasn't just another waypoint on the Silk Road, it was an oasis of staggering sophistication. A city where Chinese silks met Roman glass, where Persian spices changed hands under awnings woven from desert reeds. At its peak around the 3rd century, Loulan thrived in the cruel embrace of the Taklamakan, one of Earth's most unforgiving deserts. Its survival was a miracle of hydraulics. A labyrinth of canals drew life from the Tarim River, turning the sands green with orchards and barley fields. Yet by the 6th century, the canals ran dry, the markets emptied, and the desert, patient as always, began to bury its bones. The mystery of Loulan's demise begins with the very river that birthed it. Core samples drilled from the Tarim Basin reveal a chilling timeline, layers of sediment showing the river's flow dwindling over centuries, then vanishing abruptly. Climate scientists point to a grim culprit, the slow southward migration of the monsoon belt, which starved Central Asia's glaciers and siphoned moisture away from the region. But Loulan's death wasn't just written in the clouds. Human hands played their part. Archaeologists sifting through the ruins found evidence of reckless water management, irrigation channels dug too wide, orchards overplanted beyond the land's capacity. The city's final years were marked by desperate attempts to dig deeper wells, their walls shored up with whatever wood could be spared, even coffins pried from graves. Yet water alone doesn't explain why Loulan was abandoned so completely. The Silk Road wasn't just a path, it was a living organism shifting with politics and plague. When the Northern Wai dynasty consolidated power in the 5th century, they rerouted caravans northward to safer, more controlled routes. Loulan, once a thriving crossroads, became a detour, then a ghost town. The final blow may have come from an unexpected quarter, paper. As China's bureaucracy expanded, demand for Loulan's most famous export high-quality hemp paper plummeted, replaced by wood pulp alternatives from the east. A city built on trade found itself with nothing left to sell. What makes Loulan's ruins so haunting isn't just their emptiness, but their intimacy. The desert's dry air preserved moments frozen in time. A child's woolen mitten dropped in a courtyard, a wooden tablet bearing a scribe's unfinished poem, even the remains of a woman dubbed the Loulan Beauty, her auburn hair still braided after 4,000 years. These aren't artifacts, they're unanswered questions. Did she watch the last caravan leave? Did she stay hoping the waters would return? Modern satellite imagery reveals the cruel irony of Loulan's fate. The Tarim River, after centuries of absence, has begun to shift back toward the ruins too late for the city, but a stark reminder that deserts have longer memories than humans. As we pump aquifers dry and reroute rivers to feed our own cities, Loulan stands as a warning etched in sand. Civilizations don't end with a bang, but with the last drop of water, the last trader turning away, the last hope crumbling like a dried-up canal. The desert didn't kill Loulan, it simply waited for us to do the job ourselves. Somewhere in the Gulf of Mexico, where the blue waters stretch unbroken to the horizon, there's an island that shouldn't exist, or rather, one that stopped existing. Bermeja first appeared on Spanish maps in the 1600s, a tiny dot northwest of the Yucatan Peninsula, its name etched confidently alongside real landmasses like Cozumel and Isla Mujeres. By 1722, it was gone erased from nautical charts as if it had never been. But here's the twist: Bermeja's disappearance wasn't just a cartographer's slip. It became a geopolitical ghost, haunting border disputes and oil negotiations for centuries. How does an entire island vanish from history, and why does its absence still matter today? Theories about Bermeja split into two camps: those who believe it was never real, and those convinced it met a watery end. Skeptics point to the era's unreliable mapping practices. Spanish explorers often sketched coastlines from sailors' accounts, filling gaps with speculative islands to avoid blank spaces. Some even duplicated landmasses under different names. But Bermeja's case is stranger. Multiple independent maps, including French and British charts, placed it consistently at the same coordinates for over a century. Then there's the depth factor. Modern sonar scans show the seafloor near Bermeja's supposed location is shallow, just 60 to 80 meters deep, raising the possibility of a sunken atoll. Could rising seas or a sudden subsidence event have drowned it? Bermeja's ghostly presence took on new life in the 21st century, when Mexico and the United States clashed over oil rights in the Gulf. The island's historical coordinates fell squarely within a disputed zone rich in untapped reserves. If Bermeja had existed, it would have extended Mexico's exclusive economic zone by thousands of square miles. In 2009, the Mexican government launched an official search, scouring the area with ships and satellites. They found nothing: no ruins, no shoals, not even a seamount that could have once breached the surface. Yet the controversy refused to die. Conspiracy theories flourished, suggesting the CIA had dynamited the island to secure U.S. oil interests, or that early Spanish settlers had exaggerated its size to claim more territory. The truth might be simpler, but no less fascinating. Marine geologists note that the Gulf's floor is riddled with salt domes, underground pillars of evaporated ancient seas that can rise or collapse over centuries. A dome's sudden sinking could have swallowed Bermeja whole, leaving no trace. Or perhaps the island was always a mirage, a collective hallucination born from wishful navigation. Either way, its legacy endures in the unlikeliest places. Modern Mexican school textbooks still debate its existence, and online forums buzz with amateur sleuths analyzing century-old maps for clues. Bermeja's story isn't just about a missing speck of land. It's a testament to how easily fiction and fact blur in the gaps of history, and how the shadows of lost places still shape the world long after they're gone. Whether real or imagined, this phantom island reminds us that maps aren't just records of geography. They're snapshots of human ambition, fear, and sometimes the stories we're desperate to believe. And in the end, that might be the most enduring mystery of all. Pripyat wasn't just a city, it was a Soviet promise cast in concrete. Built in 1970 to house the elite engineers and scientists of Chernobyl's nuclear power plant, it embodied everything the USSR dreamed of: wide boulevards lined with modernist apartment blocks, schools stocked with the latest equipment, even an amusement park with a gleaming Ferris wheel, scheduled to open just days after the disaster. This wasn't merely a town, it was propaganda in 3 dimensions, proof that socialism could outshine the West even in the realm of urban living. Then, in the early hours of April 26, 1986, Reactor 4 exploded, and Pripyat's utopia evaporated in 48 hours. What makes Pripyat's ruins so unsettling isn't just their emptiness, it's how abruptly life froze. Walk through the decaying palace of culture today, and you'll find gas masks strewn across nursery floors, their straps still tied in tiny knots. The hospital basement holds firemen's boots fused to the floor by radioactive runoff. Even the amusement park's bumper cars, never ridden, rust under open skies like grotesque sculptures. These aren't artifacts of gradual decline. They're snapshots of a single spring morning when 50,000 people were told to take only what they could carry, leaving behind birthday cakes on tables and bicycles leaning against railings. The Soviet machine, so adept at building cities, had no protocol for unbuilding them. Yet Pripyat's tragedy isn't just in its abandonment, it's in the lies that sealed its fate. For 36 hours after the explosion, state media insisted all was normal. Children played in contaminated playgrounds, couples strolled past air thick with invisible poison. The first evacuation buses didn't arrive until the afternoon of April 27th, by which time many residents had already absorbed lethal doses of iodine-131. The delay wasn't just bureaucratic incompetence, it was ideological stubbornness. Admitting the scale of disaster would shatter the myth of Soviet technological supremacy, so the city's people became collateral damage in a war against truth. Decades later, Pripyat has become an accidental time capsule, its decay a paradox of preservation. Unlike ancient ruins worn smooth by centuries, these buildings collapsed from the inside out, not by nature's patience, but by humanity's hubris. The famous swimming pool, its blue tiles now cracked by ice and weeds, still echoes with the ghosts of lapsed swimmers who never aged. The music school's pianos, their keys swollen with moisture, play no requiems but their own. Even the trees have staged a mutiny, their roots prying apart pavement with silent vengeance. But the most haunting lesson of Pripyat isn't about radiation, it's about fragility. This wasn't some backward village caught in catastrophe's path. It was a pinnacle of modern planning, a city designed to showcase humanity's triumph over chaos. And yet, one flawed reactor design, one botched safety test reduced it to a cautionary tale. The Ferris wheel that never turned, the carousel that never spun, they're not just relics. They're mirrors reflecting our own faith in the unshakable. Every modern metropolis, from Tokyo to New York, operates on the same assumption, that the systems holding civilization together are infallible. Pripyat whispers the uncomfortable truth they're not. Today, as tours creep cautiously through the exclusion zone and wildlife reclaims the streets, Pripyat's legacy lingers like cesium in the soil. It's a monument not to disaster, but to the illusion of control. The apartments still stand, their walls papered with peeling propaganda posters urging workers to build the future. A future that never came. Perhaps that's the most Soviet irony of all. The perfect city, built to last 1,000 years, undone in a single night. And in its silence, it asks a question we've yet to answer. How many of our own cities are just one miscalculation away from becoming the next Pripyat? Port Royal was a city that laughed in the face of morality, a pirate haven so debauched, so gloriously lawless, that one visitor claimed it was the most wicked and sinful place in the world. Nestled on a spit of sand at the mouth of Kingston Harbor, this was the Wild West of the Caribbean, where gold-laden galleons unloaded their plunder and buccaneers like Henry Morgan held court in taverns overflowing with rum and recklessness. The streets thrummed with a chaotic energy, prostitutes in silk, gamblers tossing doubloons onto marked cards, and black market auctions where stolen Spanish treasures changed hands under the flicker of oil lamps. For decades, Port Royal thrived as the hemisphere's unofficial capital of sin, a place where fortunes were made and souls were squandered before last call. Then, on June 7, 1692, the earth opened its jaws. The earthquake struck at precisely 11:43 in the morning, a fact recorded by a pocket watch recovered centuries later, its hands frozen at the moment disaster arrived. Witnesses described the ground rolling in waves like the sea, buildings dancing before collapsing into clouds of dust, but the real horror came next. As the sand beneath the city liquefied, entire streets slid into the harbor, swallowed so quickly that people running from crumbling churches found themselves suddenly submerged, their last breaths bubbling through the turquoise water. In less than 10 minutes, 2/3 of Port Royal vanished beneath the waves, taking nearly 2,000 souls with it. Survivors clung to floating debris, watching as the wreckage of their world shattered barrels of rum, splintered gambling tables, even the governor's prized collection of stolen Bibles drifted past like macabre confetti. Almost immediately, the whispers began. Preachers across Europe declared the disaster divine punishment, pointing to Port Royal's reputation as a modern-day Sodom. Even the quake's timing seemed suspiciously poetic, striking at the height of business hours when the city's vices were on full display. But geology tells a different story. Port Royal's fate was written millennia before the first pirate raised a toast. The city sat atop a loose foundation of sand and coral rubble, piled hastily atop a prehistoric landslide. When the quake hit likely a magnitude 7.5, the shaking destabilized this already precarious base, triggering a phenomenon called liquefaction. The ground didn't just crack, it turned to liquid, a sinking slurry that offered no resistance to the weight of brick and stone. Divers exploring the sunken ruins today uncover eerie snapshots of that morning. A pewter spoon still balanced on the edge of a table, a pair of leather shoes tied neatly as if their owner had just stepped out. Most haunting of all, the preserved skeleton of a child clutching a porcelain doll, their remains encased in the oxygen-deprived silt that became their tomb. These aren't just artifacts, they're visceral reminders that Port Royal's destruction wasn't some abstract moral lesson. It was a human tragedy, indiscriminate in its cruelty. The pious merchant drowned alongside the cutthroat, the stolen church silver sinking just as fast as the tavern's ill-gotten gold. Yet the city's legacy refuses to stay buried. Modern seismic studies reveal Port Royal's fate wasn't unique, just accelerated. The same geological vulnerabilities lurk beneath coastal megacities from San Francisco to Jakarta, where landfill and loose sediment mimic the pirate haven's shaky foundations. When we marvel at Port Royal's ruins, we're not just gazing at a cautionary tale about vice and virtue. We're staring into a mirror, one that reflects our own cities perched precariously between human ambition and the earth's indifference. The real sin wasn't the pirates' debauchery, it was the arrogance of building a kingdom on sand and expecting it to last forever. The waves, as always, had the final word. From golden legends to drowned ruins, these 25 cities stand as silent witnesses to the rise and fall of human ambition. Each one began as a vision, a perfect grid, an unshakable fortress, a utopia carved from wilderness, yet all shared the same humbling fate. They remind us that no blueprint, no matter how brilliant, can outmaneuver time's relentless tide. But here's the paradox: their disappearances make them more compelling, not less. A city that endures becomes ordinary, its story fading into the background noise of daily life. But a city lost that lingers in the imagination, its mystery pulling us backward through centuries, demanding we piece together its final moments. Consider what these ghosts teach us. El Dorado warns of the dangers of obsession, how the pursuit of an illusion can blind us to the riches already within reach. Cahokia's crumbling mounds whisper about the delicate balance between human innovation and environmental limits, and Pripyat's rusting Ferris wheel screams a cautionary tale about the fragility of systems we assume are infallible. These aren't just stories of collapse, they're masterclasses in adaptation, resilience, and sometimes the wisdom of letting go. The people of Pavlopetry didn't fight the rising sea, they moved inland, carrying their knowledge forward. The builders of great Zimbabwe didn't vanish, they transformed, their legacy living on in new forms. Yet for all their lessons, these cities also spark something deeper: wonder. There's magic in standing before Teotihuacan's charred temples or tracing the outline of Port Royal's sunken taverns, feeling the gulf of time collapse beneath your fingertips. They challenge us to question our own certainties. What assumptions are we building upon? What vulnerabilities lurk beneath our gleaming skylines? And when future generations sift through our ruins, what will they say about the choices we made? So which lost city resonates with you? Is it the watery enigma of Vinta, its bells still ringing beneath the Baltic waves? Or perhaps Shambhala, a kingdom that may never have been, and yet, in its endless elusiveness, feels more real than stone? Drop your favorites in the comments below, and let's keep the conversation alive. History isn't just about facts, it's about the stories we choose to carry forward. And if you're hungry for more journeys into the shadows of the past, hit that subscribe button, because the next lost city is waiting, and its secrets are yours to uncover.